每个理想都有实现的可能。4年来，小银科技以智慧金融助力1800万人逐梦前行。小银科技给理想前行的力量。
本节目由小银科技冠名播出。
Well, I first got involved in climate change because I just felt that it was so deeply unfair that especially poor and vulnerable people and the creatures of our world, nature, were being so impacted by the actions of people, other people, and that I wanted to work to try and give a voice to those constituencies because I could see that the issue of climate change was something that was just going to be a defining issue of our time.
詹妮弗·摩根，绿色和平全球总干事，达成巴黎协定的幕后推手。他从2016年4月开始担任全球性环保组织绿色和平的全球总干事。在这之前，他曾经是世界自然基金会、世界自然研究所等机构的全球气候项目总监。20多年来，气候变化议题一直是他关注的焦点。他深入参与到了联合国气候变化框架公约下的全球性谈判，是现任联合国政府间气候变化专门委员会第5次评估报告的评审专家。就在今年，他被知名的政府间知乎型网络 A Political 评选为全球气候政策影响力人物 Top 100。他所在的绿色和平组织是全球知名的国际非政府组织。1971年，从加拿大的温哥华开出了一艘挂有绿色和平条幅的渔船。这艘驶向美国阿姆吉特卡岛的渔船载着12个人，他们要用行动阻止美国在阿姆吉特卡岛的核试验。从一艘渔船出发，绿色和平逐渐成长为了全球最具影响力的环保组织之一。它在全球的55个国家和地区设有分部，在全球有超过300万的支持者。这是绿色和平的彩虹勇士号航船。从1978年开始，彩虹勇士1号就在全球范围内航行，拦截运煤、非法运作木材、非法捕鱼的船只。到现在，彩虹勇士号已经更新到了第3代。这是绿色和平的代表性抗议行动之一。与其他的环保组织相比，绿色和平的一大特点是善于用各种引人瞩目的行动向公众传播环保理念。在欧美国家，绿色和平组织行动所带来的舆论影响力能够震慑到政府决策者和大型跨国公司，但同时它也因为激进的行动和理念备受争议。如今，绿色和平已经走过了48个年头，在环境和技术条件不断的变化下，它也经历了一系列的转变。
And we all know Greenpeace is an international environmental organization which with a very long history. So during the past several years, we know the whole organization mechanism and also campaign strategy changed. So can you briefly summarize the different important stage of transition in the Greenpeace history?
I mean, I think it's true that things have changed, but some things have stayed very much the same. So we're a science-based organization. We work to bring the complex into the simple in a way that people can understand with pictures, with videos. We have ships that are out there. Our ships have always played an important role in bringing people into the challenges that we face. I think some of the changes, though, are as social media has taken up, as technology has moved, we've found new ways of helping people engage or be part, see what's at stake. So, for example, virtual reality. You know, you can put your goggles on and you can see the plastic bottles in the bottom of the ocean. You can see the melting glaciers that are occurring. So, and also I think just finding ways of connecting people with each
Many administrators and entrepreneurs. What gains do you have?
Well, I think the goal is to really, number one, understand what's happening now in China. It's such an important place for the world. And so I think to really see what the latest thinking is, and then to think about how Greenpeace can be supportive of that. So for entrepreneurs that are trying to make renewable energy scale up, how can Greenpeace be working to support them? Or for the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, who is hosting a big meeting coming up on biodiversity. What can we be doing both in China and globally to make that the most successful meeting that it can be?
How do you see the China's effort in recent years in deal with the environmental protections?
Well, I think it's clear that China is a key player globally, and all conversations also need to take place in Beijing. And we saw that in the lead up to the Paris Agreement and the work that happened between China and the US and with Europe. I think that China has made great strides, particularly on the air pollution problem and PM 2.5 and renewables. I think the key thing right now, though, is to really double down and make sure that those trends continue, that there isn't a return back to use of too much coal, and because air pollution is so important for the health of people here, and also reduction of coal and shifting to clean energy helps on the climate crisis as well.
How about some new waste, such as the electric waste, which has become more prominent because of the development of the economic and technology companies? How can we actually balance those technological process with the environment?
Well, China's in a good position on that because it's both producing and using a lot of electronics. And I think one of the key things is to look at how to put in place recycling of those products. First of all, to look and see, can you have the most circular approach as possible? So using recycled or reused materials in the production of that, then recycling them close to home and bringing them back into the production signals.
So what's the role of China in the global environmental protections? What's our specific?
Well, China is clearly one of the most important players globally, both because it's such an important country on the world stage and because it is a big contributor to greenhouse gases. I mean, the United States obviously has been doing that longer. It's a longer historical emitter. So I think that especially now with the Trump administration in place, I think more people are looking to China to play a torch-bearing role, to really drive an innovation-based economy where emissions are reduced and where renewable energy grows. And I think particularly for other developing countries, the way that China goes and how China partners with those countries is more important than ever. More important than ever.
Maybe become an example for other developing countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think looking at the growth of renewable energy here in China, looking at the reduction of coal and how China has achieved that is very relevant for places like Indonesia or places in Africa or all across the world. And even I would say, can provide lessons also for developed countries back into Europe and the United States as well. I think the overall effect is, number one, it was a watershed moment because it brought countries together in a new way to work on climate. I think the key now is on implementation. So how are countries doing on implementation? And I think that's mixed. I think we have to be honest about that. I think some countries are moving forward and are meeting their targets, but I think there's others that are further behind. And so I think it really requires a level of diligence on the ground, because it's easy to have kind of a nice statement, but when it gets into, okay, are we phasing out coal? Are we bringing in renewable energy? Are we stopping deforestation? That's where we need all countries to remain vigilant.
Okay, so speaking of the IPCC special report, do you think those zero emission goals is possible to achieve on time? What are the conditions right now?
I think what the IPCC report does is it gives us a rescue plan. And yes, it does show how it is technically possible to stay below 1.5 degrees. However, it requires governments and corporate leaders treating it like the emergency that it is. We can't wait any longer. I read something recently that the first report in the United States on climate change was in 1965. We don't have that kind of time anymore. So the key thing is to start to really scale up action now. And if we all do that together, we do still have the chance to stay below 1.5, but we need to treat it like an emergency. We need to treat it with the urgency that we do other problems that come forward, whether they be conflicts or whether they be health crises. That's the type of approach that we need.
My solemn duty to protect America and its citizens. The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, but begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out.
Protection, which is the very unstable geopolitical status. What's your prediction for this trade in future? Will the United States election in 2020 gonna bring more viable challenges to those corporations?
Well, I think the thing to know about it's international cooperation is fundamental on solving climate change, and I think the Paris Agreement is the thing that represents that. The good thing thus far has been that despite the irresponsible position of the Trump administration, the rest of the world has moved forward. And China's played a very important role on that. So I think, there are these challenges, but it means that countries that are in the agreement need to stay the course and make sure that it continues to be on the agenda. I think the election in the US is absolutely fundamental for what happens in the future. I think, on the one hand, you see on the local level and in the corporate level a huge amount of support for action on climate change in the United States. And you see all the candidates, I think there's 21 now in the Democratic field, they all understand and support the Paris Agreement. Some support no new fossil fuel exploitation. One candidate's running just because of climate change, right? So there's a much greater awareness in the country of the climate crisis. But we need both countries to keep moving forward, and we need that transformation in the U.S.
Speaking of that, I know you have offered counseling for many country leaders about environmental policies. So what's the priority with making the environmental policies? How to balance their own country's need and with the global need?
I think the key is to see it all together. I think oftentimes there's this sense of, well, there's the environment and then there's the rest of the economy. But actually they're one thing. So I think leaders are looking for ways of solving 2 or 3 or 4 problems at once. And you can do that on these issues. Because if you're thinking about, for example, if you have water shortages and air pollution, well then you should use less coal. Because of all the water that it uses and the air pollution that it causes, as well as climate change. So I think using a pragmatic approach, but the other thing country leaders are looking for is what's their role in the world? Where do they want to be in the global economy? And I think that's the other area of bringing in the latest research that Greenpeace and others can bring in, that I've tried to bring into those leaders to show if they are able to get the right frameworks in place, the right 5-year plan, right, that they can really leapfrog and play a very positive role both for the world and for their country.
Can you be more specific? What kind of the efforts developing and developed countries should to make respectively based on their different situations? They have different efforts and responsibility at this stage.
Sure. I think what the Paris Agreement did was say, you know, basically as a world, we need to phase out emissions to zero because we're in a climate emergency. And, but clearly there are different responsibilities that are there. So every country has some responsibility, but developed countries need to act more quickly. So for example, if you look at coal, which is one of the main causes of climate change, burning coal, developed countries need to phase out their coal use by 2030. And you are seeing that happening in a number of different countries around the world where they're making that decision. Developing countries would have a bit more time on that. Or when they need to get to phasing out and going to zero emissions. The European Union has just put out a proposal that they get there by 2050. Greenpeace is saying they need to be there earlier by 2040 in order to allow developing countries a bit more time. But the thing I think to know is that it's in every country's interest to move faster, because by moving away from fossil fuels, you reduce air pollution, you help on health, you drive an innovation-based economy, which brings more jobs. There's a wealth of jobs in solar, for example. And so combining those things, I think, is in the interest of everyone, but clearly developed countries have to take the lead.